I wanted to give some deep thought and contemplation to the Riyadh Comedy Festival before I offered a simple knee-jerk reaction, because I was angry on a certain level, like many people were. But upon deeper reflection, I had a more nuanced reaction, which I will try to share. It seemed to me it wasn't simply a black and white issue. I'd been to Saudi Arabia around 2017, so it was before the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, but they were still doing their share of executions at that time. It was for a show I did for Netflix called Larry Charles' Dangerous World of Comedy, and it's still on, so if you want, you can see the segment on Saudi Arabia. In it, I met a number of comedians, particularly a couple of female comedians, and they were amongst the smartest and coolest women I'd met anywhere. And they wore the full abaya, and in one case, a woman named Amy Rocco actually wore the niqab, the veil. Amy was very hip and funny and popular and wore the veil when she performed. The other, Hatun Kadi, wore the abaya and actually had a PhD. I mean, I don't know how many comedians in America have PhDs. One of the points that they both made to me was that their clothing forced people to judge them on their thoughts, their minds, their material, and not their looks. So yes, at that time they couldn't drive, but they argued, and I agreed, that women in this culture, American culture, are exploited for all kinds of physical and superficial reasons. And again, they did material at that time about not being allowed to drive and other issues in the Saudi society. I also interviewed a comedian named Fad Albutari, who was known as the Seinfeld of Saudi Arabia. He was a very popular middle-of-the-road comedian, not very controversial. His career was thriving. He was playing around the world, but he was married to a woman who was amongst the foremost women's activists who had been jailed and tortured a number of times, and eventually they were both arrested and, from what I understand, forced to separate. She is still living with many, many restrictions inside Saudi Arabia and hasn't really been active since 2021, so I'm not sure what happened to her. So here's some questions. Why is Saudi Arabia our ally? This is where it gets tangled. American politicians get rich from their ties with Saudi Arabia like they do with Israel and manage to overlook the morality and ethics of such relationships. If you believe that the 9/11 hijackers came from Saudi Arabia, why would we consort with our enemies? It begs the question of who is responsible for 9/11. There have always been politicians who benefited from consorting with the enemy. We helped the Nazis escape to America even as we were liberating the camps. Crazy, right? Remember the Sun City boycott? That boycott worked because at the time, South Africa had nothing to offer us, so we could afford to be self-righteous. We can't be self-righteous anymore. We are a country that is losing its freedom and rights. Soon, we will be the ones that are boycotted. We complain about Saudi Arabia being a theocracy, but are those in power in this country not trying to turn it into a Christian nationalist, white supremacist, fascist theocracy? Yes, Saudi Arabia has the religion police, but we have ICE and the FBI. How many people are on death row in America or who get executed who don't deserve to be there? And how many innocent people in America are being deported and disappeared? So I agree, there's no reason for wildly successful and rich comedians to play Saudi Arabia and look the other way while they continue to have slaves and murder journalists and torture activists and conduct public executions. But imagine if American comedians refused to play in America. Boycott America. until Trump is out of office and ICE stops deporting people and we stop pardoning violent white criminals like the J6ers while letting innocent minorities rot in a for-profit prison system, and Christianity is forced into our schools while books are being banned. What if American comedians boycott until we know the truth of the murders of JFK, RFK, MLK, Jeffrey Epstein, and even Charlie Kirk, and the truth about 9/11? America is the home of hypocrisy, and we are all hypocrites when we point fingers at others while we believe our own propaganda. Even me.